Welcome back to Mentor Nation, the podcast for entrepreneurs looking for real mentorship, real strategies, and real stories so that you can go out and build your dreams. I'm your host, John Abbas, and it's time for another episode, so buckle your seatbelt and let's go. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Mentor Nation podcast, Quarantine Edition. I'm just kidding. I hope all of you are staying safe and remaining positive and really just taking this time to learn something new that can potentially add value to your future. Now, speaking of adding value, today's episode is going to do just that and so much more. My guest, Lior Gantz, is an ultra successful investor, and he's the founder and CEO of wealthresearchgroup.com. Every single day, he and his team spend hours and hours researching the markets, trends, companies, and they take this extremely valuable data and they package it in a way that they can deliver it to you for absolutely free. If you are looking to invest in stocks or commodities or even just diversify and learn about other things that you can invest in, but you don't have the time or the expertise to do the right research on the thousands of companies that are out there, then you are literally going to love Lior's company. Now, one of the main things that I love about Lior and his company is his extensive research into companies that you have never heard of that are on track to be really huge names. And think of it like this. Imagine learning about Apple or Facebook before the rest of the world and like just how different your life would be if you had had the opportunity to take advantage of it. Now, in today's interview, we talk a lot about investing, diversifying your income. We really spend a good amount of time talking about the stock market and how you can make better decisions so that you truly can win in the long term. Lior shares some insights that literally blew me away and changed how I invest and how I allocate my money. Now, before we bring Lior on, I want to remind all of you guys, and I'm so excited to tell you, I'm going to tell you probably on every single episode, our new website is now live. If you just go to mentornationpodcast.com, you can check it out. I have a huge bonus that I worked really hard on waiting for you there. I spent weeks creating a completely free blueprint, and it's titled How to Get Millionaires to Mentor You. And I'm giving it away for free just for being a listener of this podcast and for being a member of the community. So definitely go check it out. mentornationpodcast.com. Click Get Your Free Blueprint. Put your email in. It'll send it right away. Now, without further ado, enjoy this awesome interview with Lior Gantz. All right, Lior, thank you so much for being on the Mentor Nation podcast. Man, I'm excited and I'm glad to have you on, man. Thank you.
Hey, no problem. Glad to be here.
Yeah, me too. So I'm really excited to share your message with the audience today. And there's a couple of reasons that I was just super pumped to have you on the show, and thanks for accepting. Number one, obviously, right now with the coronavirus, people are really starting to realize the need to make extra money, first off. Okay. And number two, people also, I feel, need to know some really smart ways to diversify so that if something like this ever happens in the future, all of their eggs aren't in one basket and they're better protected and positioned to capitalize. But before we get into all that, I just wanted to see if you could take a minute and just share exactly what you do currently with your company, Wealth Research Group, and how you help people.
Well, I hope I help people, but the website wealthresearchgroup.com is basically a free financial newsletter. It covers, the idea of it is to take the 6 to 8 hours a day that I do financial research, economic research, stock market investing, and condense it into a 5-minute read 3 times a week, and also to cover companies and opportunities that I invest in personally. So it's a mix of my big thinking in terms of like what's happening in the world, etc., and also my practical actions. Wealthresearchgroup.com is the website. You can subscribe on the homepage, and also you can click on the special reports on the top menu. There you can download a myriad of reports. It's sort of a wealth library from 16 years worth of investing that I PDF'd into various subject. So basically, that's the idea.
That's awesome. And for those of you guys listening, I just want to reiterate something. Lior spends hours a day researching, and he takes that information, packages it into bite-sized, digestible pieces of content that you can read in 5 minutes. And you said it's free. Is that right?
Yes, the financial newsletter is free, and it will always stay that way. I started this newsletter as a labor of love, and basically what happened is 4 years ago when I had a breakout year and all of the hard work of a decade or more came to fruition. I said, look, the problem with most people is not that they don't want to succeed. It's just that they don't have either the right information or the time to do it. So how can I help in that regard? And that's how it came to be.
Man, that's really awesome. And that brings me to actually what I kind of wanted to talk about next is just your story, like how you came to be who you are now. And, I've read a lot on it, and I was really blown away by just how far you've come. I mean, you grew up in a family where your father, his business went bankrupt a few times. Is that correct? Could you share a little bit about just how you got started as an entrepreneur, what led to that, and then what's happened since?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So basically, in my situation, my father was a businessman. And when I was 13, his business went under. Didn't actually go into bankruptcy, but it just went under. And he lost a lot of money. And what happened was I was 13. My needs to do things started to cost money. So I wanted to go here, wanted to go there. And obviously, that was out of the question for my parents to help with. So I started working. I started babysitting, and then by handing out flyers in my own neighborhood, and then I upsold. You can say I upsold those parents by getting some of the kids to be coached in basketball because I was playing basketball at the time.
Yep.
And then started painting decks and delivering pizzas and do all that. And when I was 16, I already had like a little nest egg. So this was 1997, and I already had like 20 grand worth of today's money saved up.
Wow.
For like 3 years, because obviously I didn't have any major expenses. The banker told me, hey, get your parents to sign a waiver. This is age 16. Get your parents to sign a waiver. You can invest these funds. And this is June 2000 now. So I started working when I was 13, 1997. 3 years later, June 2000, literally like 3 months after the dot-com bubble burst, this guy tells me to start investing. So actually a great time in hindsight.
Yep.
I picked up a few books, and there started the bug to invest for passive income and to invest for compounding and etc. in the stock market. And then what happened, with my dad is I started to fail again in the next business cycle. And when I was about 18, that happened, and then when I was 22, literally it wiped him out entirely. So that's why I knew, obviously, whatever I did would be the only way to get stuff done. So that's kind of my story. From there on, it evolved to starting businesses with great partners. That has been one of the most important things. And like I said, 4 years ago, I said, look, with everything that's blessed with, I can pass this on if I do it in the right way. And I thought that doing the Wealth Research newsletter, like a free financial newsletter, where literally, even if you think about it from a monetary standpoint, about 6 to 8 hours of reading a day, with everything that I read being a paid either books or paid reports from top networking, and brainstorming operations, etc. Things that cost tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars a year.
Right.
And you condense that. That's what I think the value is in reading the newsletter.
That's awesome. And I've read the newsletter. For those of you listening, I mean, I've read a lot of it. I spent all day yesterday digesting it, and it's really, really, really good content. You guys need to check it out. We're going to have the link in the show notes, as well as we'll talk a little bit more about it at the end. So, Lior, I know that you are a big proponent of investing, but I also know that you're very smart when it comes to getting to that point, just from what I've learned and listened to when you've been on other podcasts. And so I want to pose a scenario for you. Let's say that you're starting from scratch, and let's pretend like the coronavirus, you had a traditional business, the coronavirus wiped you out completely. And so obviously you don't have the money yet to be an investor, to invest in stocks or anything. What would you do first to start generating enough income to be able to invest?
Okay. So basically you're asking what would someone do if he had nothing.
Yeah, so it's spoken a little bit, and I just want to have you reiterate on just, all the ways that are out there right now to freelance and to make extra income so that you can get to a point where you can invest.
So I think the first thing that someone should do in terms of how to look at his life is to understand that his skills and are the first and most important thing that nothing can take away from him. So either a coronavirus or anything else. Your skill set is what determines your value to the market, how much people are willing to pay for your services, your goods, whatever it is. That's the primary problem for most people. Their skill set is just not worth a lot of money.
Right.
And therefore, that's just a fact. So the skills that are most important in the 21st century, unless you're an athlete or an entertainer of world class, etc., if you just want to be a high paid businessman or a high paid career person, you need to focus on specific skills that will get you there.
Right.
Most of these skills have nothing to do with your profession per se. In other words, the highest paid CPAs are not geniuses at tax law because there are millions of them out there.
Right.
What the best CPAs do is have leadership skills so that they can create a firm, a business. In other words, the best type of skills are business skills. So I would say that's the main thing that people don't spend any time on. When you get a degree in anything, that's a profession, and that's not the point. That's not the way to go. That's not the way to build wealth. You can build a good career, but not wealth, not sustainable wealth. And therefore, if you're not an entrepreneur or a businessman, you have to focus on being a high-paid career person and have a secondary engine, which is investments. So those are the only two paths: being either a businessman and entrepreneur on one hand, or a high-paid salary with a secondary engine. What you're talking about, the third route, is what's called the freelance route. And in that route, what you basically have is you're trying to always stay with trends and see what currently, for the next 2-3 years, people want, and supply that. And then in 2-3 years, reallocate your entire skill set and freelance in something else, etc. Because the freelance industry is very fast moving, and what people need today is not what they will need in 2-3 years from their freelancers. So that is important to understand if you're looking at that sort of a career. Now, what you can do immediately, John, is to look at what's getting the most salary per hour on freelance sites. So in other words, if you open an account right now on elance.com or any of the other freelance sites, you will see what's being most valuable to employers. What would they pay the most for? What would they pay? $50 an hour? What would they pay? 100? What would it pay? 150? And you can reverse engineer your freelance career. That's the best way to do it, because obviously if you're going to need to learn a new skill every 2-3 years, you don't need to come in there and say, I'm a great translator, and then boom, there's no translation jobs out there. You need to come in as a clean slate and say, okay, I'm looking at this. It looks like these people are getting $150 an hour to do this. Can I do that? So that's the way to approach a freelance economy if you're basically right now free and available for new options in your life. Most people, when you catch them at their 40s or 50s, they're already tied to something.
Right.
So if that's the case, then the freelance economy should be sort of a secondary thing. But I should say, John, most people that have really have been successful in life have focused on one thing. They've put all their energy in one career or one business, and that's how they've done it. I know everybody likes to say multiple streams of income, blah, blah, blah. The multiple streams of income myth is you have one fantastic business, and then you have your money working in multiple streams of income. That's fine. But you have one main business generating active income for you.
Absolutely. Man, like everything you've said in the last 5 minutes is what I preach every single day. Like, I mean, everything you said is like, it feels like it just came out of my mouth. You said something earlier about, accountants and CPAs. And, I say the same thing. I'm like, what separates Dr. Oz from another surgeon? It's not that Dr. Oz is 100 times smarter. It's just that he turned his knowledge into a business. And that's why he makes 100 times more money. And I can't tell you just you hit the nail on the head just now. Like so many people out there think that multiple streams of income is making like $50 a month from 10 different things. And it's not the case. It's using one thing that generates a foundation to be able to invest in other things. I'm so glad that you said that. And so moving on, I want to get your take on this because right now the stock market there's a lot of good buys, and I want to get your opinion on something. Let's say that you are a new investor and you want to start investing a little bit into the market. To start out with, do you recommend like a high growth stock, a stock with a really good dividend, or like a safer bet like an ETF that follows like one of the like the S&P or something different?
Most people, what they need is not to know which stock to own or to buy. What most people lack is knowledge of how the markets even work. And therefore, like you saw about a month ago in a classic rare black swan event,
right,
where the public just sold. It just sold everything and it drained its portfolios. And who was buying? The insiders of companies. So the CEOs and CFOs were buying at 1990 levels. In other words, this was the most insider buying event in the last 30 years. That's one thing.
Wow.
Secondly, who didn't sell? Who doesn't sell stocks? Sovereign wealth and pension funds. Those are the two main entities that never sell. That you can either hold or buy more. That's what they do. The only sort of institution that sells are hedge funds. They can buy and sell, and the public. Once the public sold and was out, the Federal Reserve came in and created an insane bailout plan. And who generated all the gains from the rebounds? It's all the people that were buying the dip and all of these pension funds and sovereign wealth funds. The average person has just lost 20, 30, 40, 50, 60%, depending on what he owned. He's out. He's in cash. So now he's thinking, what should I do? And knowing how markets work would have freed you from doing these enormous mistakes. Now, in general, okay, so if you're 64, this particular black swan event might have not been a bad idea to sell, right? So I'm not talking about an individual case. In general, the stock market over any lengthy period of time, so 10 years or above, does not know what a bear market is. If you look at what the S&P 500, the Dow Jones, the NASDAQ, or any large basket of American businesses have done for the past 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 years, 200 years, since 1812, every dollar has turned into over $700,000 put in American businesses. Every dollar for the past 200 years, if you've put $1 in and you gave it to your great grandchildren, $1 is turned into $700,000 inflation adjusted. So I want you to really think about that, because all you need to understand is that as an investor, if you understand how markets even work, you don't have to be a great stock picker. What you have to know is how to manage your emotions. That's the first thing. So, and that's true for most investors. The classic study on this was a Dalbar study for 30 years during the bull market from 1980 to 2002. They studied how individual investors were performing in the best stock market bull scenario in history, right? So even investors that put their money in the best mutual funds, so they had the best chances of making unbelievable returns. The mutual fund made 14 to 15% a year, which is double what the S&P 500 generates. And these investors in these mutual funds made 3 to 4%. How is that even possible? Because they tried to time in and out with every good news and bad news that they heard, and that's what happened to them. Just so you're aware, John, if you've missed the best 40 days of the stock market in the past 40 years, you have grossly underperformed the S&P 500. I'll say that again. In 40 years, so 40 times 365, that's a lot of days. If you just missed the best 40 days, you've grossly underperformed the stock market. The best thing that a new investor can do is understand that he's playing in a game that is absolutely made for one purpose. The stock market opens at 9:30 a.m. Eastern and closes at 4 p.m. Eastern every day in order to transfer money from the uneducated to the educated. That's the only purpose of the stock market. And if you do not understand that, then you're coming into this game with the wrong state of mind. So that's the long caveat to everything I'm about to say. If you understand all that, and you understand that the S&P 500 beats 93% of investors over time, including professional investors that all they do all day is try to beat the markets, then you have your program laid out in front of you. The best thing to do in order to enjoy for a lifetime of gains, so in other words, not from now till next month or from now till next year, but over a course of a lifetime, as a passive part-time investor, the best way that has been found is to invest in one of the traditional large indices over time, and obviously increase your position as the market hands you opportunities like sell-offs. This changes towards if you are looking to use that funds for retirement. In other words, as long as you're far away from retirement, that's the rule. You basically accumulate more and more America's best companies. But as you approach retirement, you need to think about other sorts of strategies and diversification, which obviously I think.
Yep. And I wanted to cover that in a second. Now, I know I'm going to get asked this question by a lot of the people that are going to listen to this podcast. And, let's say somebody wanted to do a little bit of investing in the market. Like, what platform do you think is a good one? I mean, any of them, Charles Schwab, Robinhood app, like is there a platform that you prefer over the others?
No, any of the cheap, low cost, popular ones are just good.
Got it. Awesome. Now, moving on, I have something that I'm really excited to ask you, because I know that, Wealth Research Group is so much more than just the stock market. And, I have heard you speak largely about how to diversify well and how to invest in different asset classes. So can you just talk a little bit about how you advise people, or yourself, like how you personally diversify? What are some of the different asset classes outside of just stocks, and how do you kind of allocate or balance that out?
Yeah. So first, obviously, I'm not a financial advisor at all.
Right.
In other words, there's no personal advice here. I can only tell you what I do, and let me tell you what I do. So with most of my net worth, I invest in stocks. Over time, especially at my age, 35, the compounding of owning stocks is better and superior to anything else. So if you're looking for maximized returns, no matter if there's more volatility involved. So in other words, if you're willing to go through hot showers and ice bucket showers over time and come out clean and beautiful at the end, then you should be in stocks, because those are the most volatile, but they also generate the best returns over time. The S&P 500 has returned about 8% per year for the past 100 years. Over that 100-year period, only 4 years did it actually generate 8%. In other words, in the other 96% of the time, in the other 96 years, it either was very hot or in a bear market or in decline, etc. It averaged out to about 8%, and only 4 years out of 100 years did it actually generate through a calendar year that 8%. Most of the time, it's not on the average. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So that's important to remember. Stocks, within the world of stocks, about the lion's share is invested in a group of companies called Dividend Aristocrats. Again, if you go to the Wealth Research Group site and you click on the top menu on the button that says Dividend Mania, you can read a lot more about this special group of companies. There are about 52 companies as of 2019. Now it's 64 companies that are Dividend Aristocrats, very unique group of companies that have, as a group, outperformed the S&P 500. So if you're looking to, as a part-time investor, beat the S&P 500, here's a group of companies that if you just buy the ETF over time has been the S&P 500. So that's one thing that I do with most of my stocks portfolio. With a small amount of my stock portfolio, I speculate. In other words, I go down towards where stocks are smaller, capped, much more risk involved, much more managerial skills required in order to devour the competition. So think Starbucks, but 5 years into their operation when nobody knows about them, right? Before they become a household name. think Intel, but in the 60s. You know what I mean? So this is what we try and do. But because the failure rate is insane, you have to know what you're doing by creating the proper position sizing. In other words, not falling in love with anything, knowing how much you want to invest, knowing when the business model must have failed and you have to exit. And on the flip side, knowing the potential upside, because when you get into companies like that fail, about 7 out of 10 companies like that fail in some regard. In other words, they create a situation called a permanent loss. A permanent loss means that the price that you bought may never recover again if you didn't buy at the absolute bottom, and nobody does that, right?
Right.
So even if you pick any stock today, Coca-Cola, you buy it today, there's a chance that in 1 month it will be down, but it's not a permanent loss because over time, a company like Coca-Cola recovers and continues growing. In small cap companies, you can buy a company and it just doesn't pan out.
Right.
And it never comes back to the price that you paid. And therefore, you have to create what's called a stop loss, and you have to be very disciplined with that sort of a situation. Therefore, you have to invest much more of your time understanding who is the actual person that is going to make this operation prosper. Is he a killer? Is he a winner? And in order to do that, you might need to meet with him. So this is more in line with what's called venture capitalism or small cap capitalism. The gains are astronomical when this goes right. And therefore, what you must look for are boom and bust industries. The one I really focus on is the resource sector, where, as you can see, even companies like ExxonMobil, the world's largest oil company, can go down from $80 a share that it traded to 30. So
that's right.
Even a blue chip company can fall more than 50%. So think about small time oil companies. So that is what I mean by that. Now, if you're able to really find the best ones and buy them when the cycle is after a huge turn down, then you really have a chance to create a small fortune. Obviously, like I said, because the position size is so small with each one, unless you want to dabble. So if you want to be prudent, you'll need a few of them. And if they pan out, then it's something that really becomes a huge success in your life. Yeah. So that's that. Now, outside of the stock market, John, I love to have cash. I love to have precious metals in physical form because that's the best form of cash. And I can talk days about this because most people just don't own precious metals, and it's a huge mistake.
Yeah. Are you more bullish on silver or gold right now?
I would say in the next year to two on silver, over time on gold.
Got it.
And besides that, real estate. Now, real estate is a game where you can come in with a lot of money or you can start at scratch. Just depends on where you want to come in on that spectrum. There are real estate professions where what you need is skills, and there are real estate professions where what you need is money. So just depends. But since the 2008 bust, the real estate industry has really changed. You can really you don't have to go around with a realtor and look at like 40 homes in order to find the one anymore. It's just, you don't need to be that person that owns a few single family homes to generate a return. Funds have come into real estate and have made this very streamlined, and you can earn very decent returns doing minimal work with great success and with great stability. Some of these are only open to accredited investors, but many of them are open to non-accredited and even don't have minimums. Like you can come in and invest in a building that is rented to CVS or a Walmart, and you can just lay out like $3,000 and make 6 to 8%, whatever. But you don't have to, even if you don't have a few $100,000 to put in, you can get into real estate in America. Obviously, more safely than you would have on your own.
Absolutely. That's awesome. So I'm just going to be honest, man. In the last 30 minutes, you've given thousands of dollars worth of just gold. The wisdom has been amazing. And I know we're about to wrap up. I really want to make sure everybody knows just how to connect with you, where to find your resources. You've even written a book. Is that correct?
Just recently, I published a book. It's free, though, because of coronavirus. So instead of charging something for it, I just published the ebook online at wealthresearchgroup.com/book. You can just go ahead and download that. because everybody's home, everybody's reading. Why not?
That's right. Absolutely. Now, is there any other, way to connect with you if somebody just wants to follow? Is wealthresearchgroup.com the best way to start following your content and just, seeing what you're doing and what you're putting out there?
The newsletter. Yeah, 100%. Yes.
Awesome. Guys, I encourage all of you guys to do it. Lior, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time today. You've given just some incredible insights. Can we wrap up with just you leaving the audience with just one big takeaway from just like with all of this craziness going on right now and the uncertainty, is there just one big takeaway, whether it's an action or a mindset that you want to leave with everybody before we wrap up?
John, I've read Napoleon Hill and Wallace Watless books for 8 years straight until my brain changed. That is basically how I turned my life around. And I believe that anyone that does the same thing can reach the sky. So I would say, look, if you do nothing else, look up these 2 names of authors, dead authors, and start to read anything that they ever wrote. And in my opinion, if you do that as a lifestyle, you will have a phenomenal adventure on this planet.
I absolutely agree with that. One of my mentors here in Nashville, he's worth several $100 million, and every year he reads Think and Grow Rich. There's 5 books that he reads every single year, and that's one of them. And he's just the greatest book ever written, even though it was written in like the 30s, late 30s. It's crazy just how relevant it is today. Unbelievable. Lior, thank you so much for your time, man. I can't tell you how much I appreciate and how much I know the audience will appreciate your message. And man, I really hope when all this is over, I can have you on the podcast again one day.
Oh, 100%.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that episode, and I really hope that you take the information that Lior shared and you do something with it. Information without action is completely useless. He shared some phenomenal things on that episode, and I highly encourage you to take advantage of his company, Wealth Research Group. Just roll on over, wealthresearchgroup.com, subscribe to the newsletter. The minute I interviewed him, I subscribed to the newsletter myself. I read every single email. It's just packed with valuable information, and I know you'll take a lot out of it. It's crazy because while I was doing research on Lior, I went to his website, and 3 hours later, I was still reading articles. I just went there to read his bio, but I found myself on there for hours and hours because it was just so helpful and packed with practical advice. Now, last but not least, if you enjoyed the show, I have to throw this in there. Shameless plug, please, please, please. We would love for you to leave us a 5-star rating and a review. And listen, I promise, if I see you out somewhere, a bar, a restaurant, coffee shop, I will buy you coffee or a drink. If I ever truly get famous with this podcast, I might have to locate this episode and delete that promise because I might go bankrupt because of it. But for now, it stands. Guys, that's all for today. Stay safe out there. Thank all of you for listening and participating, and I can't wait to see you next week with another eye-opening episode. Take care.